What I want to do today is to talk about large group identity. Whenever I go to some places, because I work with kids in PLO kids in Tunis when Yasser Arafat was there. I worked with kids in Estonia after Estonia regained its independence. I work with kids in Cyprus. I work with kids in Kuwait after Saddam Hussein invaded that country. So I've been around, and they say to me, and I also worked with refugees. After the Soviet Empire collapsed, I worked especially in Germany with Turkish refugees for a long time. So they tell me, what do you do? What is good for them? It's impossible to answer that question. As I saw yesterday, probably I was with, 30 Turkish immigrants in Austria, and their adjustments were all different. But all of them had the question, who am I now? So I will say something about common elements of immigrants. Who am I now? And then I will also tell you some common elements of the host countries. So let me start with identity. Some of the kids yesterday kept saying to me, they were wonderful. I mean, they were so bright, my God. One of them, he was from Bosnia, very bright boy, kept saying, oh, well, we are all human beings, so why do we have paying attention to having this identity or that identity? Well, because that's the way human beings are. We have different identities, large group identities. So what is large group identity? The issue is then not to make our prejudice malignant, but to keep our prejudices benign. And if we see differences in a benign way, then we enjoy the beauty of diversity. Under certain circumstances, we stop seeing the beauty of diversity, and then we do horrible things. So, if you allow me, I'm not going to use any technical words, and if I make it very simplistic, please excuse me. Everybody has an identity. Identity means your self-experience, who you are. If you come and lie on my couch, after I listen to you for some time, I kind of make an internal map of you. You know what I mean? Here, the father figure, mother figure, this conflict, that conflict, and so on. But and then I say, these are the characteristics of this individual, and so on, and I work with you. Identity is how you perceive yourselves. This personal identity, who you are, also obligatory fashion becomes connected with your large group identity. Let me explain by what I mean by large group identity. It can be ethnic, it can be religious, it can be tribal, it can be political ideology. You are living in a community of communists or capitalists, and you have that kind of ideology from childhood on. So thousands of people or millions of people who will never meet each other, never see each other, share certain sentiments. Okay? How does this thing become part of us? I have been teaching psychiatry, psychoanalysis for ages, and now we are learning more and more real big research about how identity develops and how from childhood on, even before we are born, we have almost a psychobiological sense of we-ness. No child develops his or her mind alone. Every child, baby, develops his or her mind during interaction with a mothering person. It may be mother, it may be father, it may be somebody else, but mothering person. Let me give you one example of research. Imagine that you have a brand new baby, and they put you in a room, and in the other room they put 10 newborn babies, and they wire you. And babies cry in the other room. You hear them, but you don't see them. You cannot say which one is yours. But when your baby cries, your brain goes crazy. So we are now learning that very early this connection is built within us. One other experiment, if you have a mother wearing a red dress and puts in front of a very small baby, same toy, but in different colors, the baby will choose the red one. So Venus is part of us. But as kids develop, around 8 months now we know it's about earlier, much earlier. The baby recognizes the familiar other and separates the familiar other from unfamiliar other. For example, if the baby is very happy lying in a bed and you smile and go like this, baby smiles back. If I put a mask on my face, a smiling mask, and I do like that, baby smiles back. But when baby is 8 months old, the mask will be unfamiliar other, baby will cry. So from many, many experiments, now we know that developing sensation that there is other people, there are unfamiliar others, familiar others, this is part of us. And this kind of separation, etc., individuation, we call it, takes place. The babies, or now children, identify with their parents. What are the important ones? Language. That makes you different from people that speak another language. Soup, nursery rhymes, smell. So you identify with things that you like, or you decide identify, but whatever it is, you identify with others. And you start seeing that the familiar others are different from the other others. Now, what we learned in last 10, 30 years, especially after the Holocaust. Nobody was studying Holocaust because it was too difficult to study. And later we learned that second and third generation people to whom parents said nothing about what had happened, they have behavior patterns expressing this historical event. So what we learn is that in identification, it is the child who takes the functions of the adult. But now we learn also that adults, without knowing, without talking actually openly, they find ways to put into the baby's growing mind all kind of historical events, images. Then child grows up some more and recognizes that certain symbols do not belong to him or her. And separation from the other becomes crystallized. Should I give an example? Okay, we are talking about that I was from Cyprus. Okay, can you imagine me now as a 4-year-old kid? And my grandmother takes me to a farm, and it is a Greek farm. They have Greeks and Turks in Cyprus. And suddenly, I see some pigs, the baby pigs, and I want to go and love them, touch them. What would my grandmother say? Don't touch them. Those symbols. But I don't know what Greekness means yet. But I know that certain things belong to me, certain things belong to others. Yesterday, there was a lovely lady. She was, 14 years old. And that's why I'm remembering pigs. She's a Turkish lady, young lady. And in school, they were pushing her away. And they were saying to her that, you don't eat pig. Therefore, you're different. And she was feeling so humiliated. And she went home and asked her mother, can I eat pig? And wonderful mother, looks like it. I talked to her more. Mother said, okay, I'm a Muslim, I don't eat pigs, but you, my daughter, you're growing up in Austria. You decide if you want to eat pig, go ahead and eat pig. And this girl started eating pig, and now everybody loves her. So what I'm trying to say that we should not go around and say we are all the same. That is not the way it is. I can also tell you from human developmental point of view that we are always there. We feel like we are the human beings and others pseudo-species. So that as we develop our own personal identity intertwined with our large group identity, that means that we also develop obligatory fashion, prejudice. And prejudice should not be a bad word as long as it is not dangerous, malignant. That means it's me, I have my ways, my food, my language, my whatever, history, and that's you have yours, and fine, it's beautiful to see you, you're different. When prejudice becomes hostile and malignant, then we have problems. Imagine a huge tent. Imagine a huge tent. And under this tent, there are thousands or millions Catalans, Basque, Spanish, Austrian, Turks, whatever, Polish, or communists, or Sunni Muslims, whatever. They're having their own tent. And under this tent, there are groups, universities, sports, politics, and so on. But under the cover of the tent, everybody is under the cover of this tent, and the cover of the tent is the second clothes. We have our personal identity, and the tent's canvas is our second large group identity. So if you are thinking about two tents standing side by side, one, you go and look at one, and on it there are certain symbols, and on the other one there are other symbols. Even if they are similar, there may be some minor differences to differentiate you from the other one. Most of the symbols that play a role making things hostile are related to history. There are variations of traumas, societal traumas. If an earthquake occurs, who do you blame? God? Well, you cannot get angry at God. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Only when you are humiliated, victimized, murdered by another group with a different identity, it's only then that they do these things because you have a different large group identity. And those kind of traumas remain in our minds. Every country has their own history. Every country has their glories. Every country also have their shared disasters. Some of the shared historical events, especially bad ones, through mythology or whatever happened. Like if you are Serbian, the Battle of Kosovo. Oh my God, there were 20,000 lines of poems written about it. So something happened that certain events become your identity marker. They change function. You don't remember 600 years ago something happened. You do not remember the event. You don't even remember who died at that time. But that event, that image only happened to you. So you hold on these images. And when there is new problems, even with people who are not in the same people in their history, you get into conflict as if without knowing, society pushes a button and all historical images also get inflamed and make things very complicated. I told you when I was teaching at University of Vienna, we had the Polish kids and we had Turkish kids. And we were talking about history, so I said to them, you guys go and read books about the Ottomans surrounding Vienna and the Polish people coming around and kicking them out. And they read it. They came to class. They were about, there were 70 of them, and then we had also guests. And boy, that historical event, it was like happened yesterday. Since there is such a thing as different identities, and there is such a thing as prejudice, in trying to bring kids together, by the way, I want to congratulate you. I was just telling the mayor, I can imagine when I was a kid, something like that would happen. You get different kids come together from different identities and they get to know. It's fascinating, fantastic effort that you are doing, you see. But when you bring them together, some kind of respect for each other's identity should take place. Don't make them to be completely alike, because that bothers their normal identity. So, for example, you know about Fulbright scholarship and so on. Mr. Fulbright was a wonderful senator in America, and after he died, his wife wanted to honor him, his memory. And from Cyprus, they would collect a bunch of teenagers, again, 13, 14-year-old kids, Greek ones and Turkish ones, put them in somewhere in Massachusetts. They would play football, dance, and everything for 3 months. This kid would be so close, and then go home. And Mrs. Fulbright sometimes would visit me and tell me how this was great, because her idea was that they should be just like that. And then summertime would come, and I would go to Cyprus, and as soon as I settled down, the very next day, my sister would call. Hey, my friend so-and-so, her son or her daughter was in Massachusetts, and they are depressed. Can you, as a psychiatrist, come and talk to them? Next morning, another one. Why? Because when they would come back, they would be perceived as traitors. So the poor kids would suffer so much. So I came up with the idea of a Swiss cheese border. This morning also I had Swiss cheese for my breakfast. What does a Swiss cheese has? Holes. Mm-hmm. This means that when you put kids together, allow them to have a Swiss cheese border, which means they can be all together, lovey-dovey, you know what I mean? Go through the hole and be kids. But the idea that there is also some difference between them, the solid part of the Swiss cheese, also should remain, so that when time comes, they can go to their own identity, and when they're playing, they can go through the hole. So this way, they can feel more comfortable. Yesterday, there was a young man from Chechnya, and he kept saying, am I a Chechnyan Austrian, or am I Austrian Chechnyan, but he was brought here when he was 10 months old. He has no idea about Chechnya. Has no idea. But parents are from that part. Father was injured. Father cannot lift things. Can you imagine? I mean, it was traumatized escape from there. And whether he knew it or not, a 10-month-old baby has no idea of being an immigrant. But parents had traumas, and they passed this to the kid, and the kid now wonders, who am I? And when I asked him, have you ever visited your hometown? Never. But he gives himself 20 years for some reason. 20 years from now on, he wants to go to see ancestors' graves and et cetera, et cetera. The idea I just wanted to pass to you is that differences, when things are benign, are beautiful. But these differences can be made to be hostile due to many, many factors. It can be individual factors. It can be societal factors. We have to get into leader-follower relationship, many aspects of psychology. But when they get hostile, they become deadly. And that is what we need to prevent. Age factor is another thing that you have to consider. Why? When kids become immigrants or refugees, it depends at what age. Their perception of the world, understanding of identities are very different from age to age. Because age is important in order to understand how people mourn what they left behind. When you go to some other place, when some trauma occurs, when you start a new life, that means certain things that belong to you or to your large group, they are left behind. When something is left behind, when something is lost, again, it is psychobiological that you have to mourn. Even if you say, I don't give a hoot, you are mourning. I'm not talking about grief reaction, crying, and so on and so on. I'm talking about mourning. So let me explain to you what mourning means. Mourning means you have an image of something. Let's say, I know Carmen, how many years did we say? Since 2006 and so on. And I came to Bregenz before. I have a mental image, or she has a mental image of me. Let's say that we have I disappear. I die. What happens to my mental image? She has to mourn that mental image. But that means that my mental image will come to her mind. She will talk to me in her mind. Maybe at the beginning, too much, and slowly it goes down. Maybe anniversary of my death, my mental image will come, and so on. So the issue is, mourning means what do you do with the mental image of the lost person or thing? This means that according to the age you have different kind of mental images. If you're a baby, you don't have a stable mental image of what you lost. But now we know your parents put some mental images in you. So everybody who is immigrant or refugee, they have to mourn in their own way. They have to go over the mental image, what was lost. And if they are teenagers, especially if they are going through adolescent passage, which is the time you live your childhood and you start becoming man or woman, all these mental images become reactivated. Yesterday, I was talking to kids who were going through adolescent passage. And my God, some of them I could see mental images. They had never had mental images. They were Turkish kids. No images of Turkey. Some of them had never been there. But suddenly he would say, I want to be a soldier. What are you going to be? Oh, he wants to go to Turkey and be a soldier in Turkey. And fascinating part that I was not expecting, most of them, when they grow up, you know what they want to be? Can you guess? In Austria? Policemen or policewomen. Is it surprising? No. When they feel like they are different, or sometime in school, other kids make fun of them. So if they are policemen, policewomen, then you protect yourself. I was very moved when a little girl started talking about she wants to be a policewoman. And suddenly I realized many of them, when they grow up in Austria, they want to be policemen or policewomen. You see? So these kind of things we have to consider when dealing with children. The human psychology, developmental psychology, how we go through steps to develop and so on. And then when we make plans, it can be more and more effective, I think. Well, let me stop talking about people coming in, and let me talk about the host countries also. Host countries also, you can imagine host countries also living under a huge tent. And you have on the tent, you have all kinds of symbols belong to you. If I'm thinking of making a picture of Austrian tent, I will put pictures of Mozart, for example, on it, or something like that. So many historical events and so on, so that you are living under this. Under this tent, adults, they have all kind of subgroups. You belong to whatever, a football team. You belong to a business. You belong to something. But when you do such things, you do not lose your morality of your childhood. Only under certain circumstances, large groups evolve in adulthood, like ISIS. Mostly when they are religious cults or terrorist organizations. At that time, people who join under such tents, like the ISIS caliphate, so to speak, then they lose their childhood morality, their childhood superego. They can do things that they could not imagine doing as children. So, but most countries that are host countries, of course, are not like that. They are typical, they have their large group identity. They have all kinds of subgroups, carpenters, doctors, dentists, whatever, artists, movie stars, etc. And they have their own subgroups and so on. And they live under this big tent, and they are not even in daily life aware of their large group identity. You don't wake up in the morning and you say, I'm Austrian. See, you don't do that. Now, I want to ask you something. Listen to me carefully. I know that everybody in this room is doing something and you are not aware of it. What are you doing? I know, but you don't know. What are you doing? What are you doing? Breathing. Yes. Everybody breathing, otherwise you'll be dead. Okay? But you're not aware of it. I mean, you're just normal. But if, God forbid, if there was a fire in this room, smoke, everybody would notice their breathing. There's a refugee crisis, and refugee crisis has become connected with terrorism. And this has made big change in the world, including America, for example. And along with other things. So that host countries also should think psychologically why they have this or that kind of reactions. And if you have anxiety about your tent canvas there's a hole in it, some people accept it, the newcomers, some don't. There are divisions in countries, in many, many countries. And we also need to understand it academically, psychologically, in order to find some responses that will be more adaptive. Since she stood up, I feel like I'm doing something bad, so I'm getting down.